Hey, Flame. It's good to be back on our second episode of our second season of the Spark Sisters. Today, we have a topic that we've been talking about off and on just between the two of us that we're going to bring now to the podcast. And it actually, it was sparked, a couple of weeks ago. I shared a post on LinkedIn about advice. And generally, when I post on LinkedIn, I get some amount of traction. But this post that I had shared, it wasn't my own. I shared someone else's post, was really, it did not get any traction when I reposted it. And I think it's because it was kind of in your face and a little bit against what maybe conventional business wisdom would be. And about that same time, you posted something on LinkedIn or shared a post on LinkedIn about what coaching actually is. And there was some overlap between the two posts. And so it really created the springboard for us to have a discussion that is going to start off with a very simple question that is probably going to take us the entire episode to answer. So with all of that said, Flame, I'm going to give you the question. Who is the best person to give you advice? And when I say you, I'm talking you in a general sense, although it could be you specifically as well. Who's the best person to give you advice?
I love this question. And I have pondered this a lot in my life because I noticed for myself that I seek a lot of advice, but I take very little of it. Maybe some of you can relate. And I think the answer at this point in my life, at midlife, is me. I'm the best person to give me advice, but it's not always a question and answer path to that understanding. Does that make sense?
I want you to talk more about that path to understanding.
So what I found is that on one hand, I have several people that I would go to for advice. So I have someone, if I'm having a relationship struggle, this would be the person I tend to go to because they've studied relationships and they bring a lot of wisdom to it. And if I have a car problem, I would go to my Uncle Ray for advice because he's been a mechanic his whole life, and I can sort of go down the list on specific topics. But what's interesting is that in areas, let's say it's relationships, in areas where I have some expertise, I also have to bring some discernment to whatever the advice is being offered. And that balance between taking on what someone else says and being authentic to myself is where the real advice rises up.
That's super good. That's super good.
What would you say to the question, who's the best person to give you advice?
Well, I think it is very similar to what you said. And of course, we talk about this when we're talking about adult people. So of course, when you're growing up, you need a lot more advice. You need people to be a little bit more prescriptive and tell you certain things. But I have found not only when I'm being given advice, whether that was solicited or unsolicited, and when I'm giving advice, I find it's often a lot stickier, a lot more fruitful if the air quotes advice is given in the form of questions observations, ideas to consider, rather than you shoulds or prescriptive guidance. Because the thing is, there's only one you. And your life, while it may overlap with others in terms of similarities in various ways, no one's life is identical to anyone else's. And so I think it's perhaps not as constructive to assume that you know what's best for anyone else. Again, you can provide some observations, some ideas, but ultimately, I think the best way to support people that are looking for guidance is to help them get to the place where they can answer the question or solve the problem in the way that's best and most authentic for them. What do you think about that?
I think it's true. I was sitting here wondering about, like, if I had a medical problem, right? So this
yeah.
I don't have that level of education. I am not a medical doctor. I mean, health interests me, so I probably know more about it than the average duck, but, I'm clearly not a doctor. So I go to my doctor for advice, and my doctor will follow best practice, which is a little different than giving advice.
Right.
Right. But I hear what you're saying, because there's a prescriptive nature to it. If X is occurring, then we're going to suggest that you go this route C. And I understand that. I understand we have to do that because cognitive work only goes so far. We can only pay attention to about 7 things at one time. So we can't be making it up every single time a patient comes to a doctor and has a cut on their leg, right? We have to
Agreed.
Have a place to go to. But when we're talking about things that are more in the nature of like a choice that I need to make, or on one level, even a medical problem, ultimately it's my body.
Right.
Ultimately, it's my healing that needs to occur. So I can take in what the doctor has to say to me. I can understand clearly why best practice has been chosen the way it's been chosen. And I still get to make a choice. And I think that's one of the fundamental experiences that people want to have in their life.
Yes.
They're making choices, that they are living their life.
Yes. Yes. And you have made a really good delineation here as well. When I think about who's the best advice or best person to give you advice is you, I also recognize that there are people with levels of expertise that I don't have and I'm never going to have. And so my choice then is, to trust their expertise. But I also think there's a huge category of advice that people seek that has nothing to do with technical specialized expertise.
See, that's more in the realm of projection.
Right. And so I do want to have the caveat, like, am I saying, no, you should like never trust scientists, or you should not trust someone that is skilled at fixing your car, or something that is much more specialized? No, I'm not saying you should dismiss that.
No.
But in terms of what should I do with my business, or what should I do about this relationship that I'm in? What should I do about aging parents? Like there are, of course, it can be inspiring and edifying to listen to other people's perspectives and observe how they've done things. Mm-hmm. But it's up to me, it's up to you to interpret and remix that in a way that's authentic to you.
Love that. What do you listen to when you're doing the remixing? Like, how do you come to your own advice?
This is one of those things that, I mean, for some people sounds maybe a little too woo-woo, although I do think there's also science that backs this up. How does it feel in my body?
Yeah.
Does it release tension or does it create tension? Does it sort of like calm everything down or have me continue to spin? So I take in things and then I'm like, what of all of this that I've been given actually physically feels the best to me? What do you do, Flame?
First, I want to say that's brilliant. It's taken me years to understand that my body knows things that my brain doesn't have words for yet.
Yeah, right.
I believe somatic sense. And I'll build on that. I think mine is probably the same thing with a slightly different view of approaching it. I check in with myself as I'm approaching the answer or the choice I'm about to make. And I check in to see, does this feel like my voice of worry and doubt and fear? Or does this feel like my voice of wisdom? Mm-hmm. Because like you're talking about with your felt sense, my voice of wisdom has a more settled quality to it, a little ping of truth, like, oh yes, that's the thing to do. Versus a choice that might be driven by fear or worry has that spinning quality that you were pointing to. And It's more like, okay, yeah, I just got to decide, or this seems like the best thing, or it'll probably all work out, and it's like agitated. So if I'm still in an agitated state, I've learned about myself that I need to keep sitting with it and looking to find the answer that fits with my authentic self. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's hard. I can be very impatient. I think a lot of intuitive people, we don't necessarily want to do the due diligence sometimes to get the best advice or, find the real answer. We just want to know it and do it. And I fit in that category. But knowing that about myself has given me more headspace and heart space to say, I don't know the answer yet. So I wait. And eventually some new piece of information, often it's not even from the person I went to for advice, right? The radio comes on and, what? That tells me what to do. But cultivating that discipline to wait and to really listen to the voice of wisdom has given me the best advice of my life.
Bravo to that. Yeah. And I think riffing off of that idea of just wanting to know, we can sometimes gorge ourselves on advice or sources for wisdom. And because we're still in an unsettled state, like if I just read one more article, if I just listen to one more podcast, if I just go to another person, like surely I will find the answer. And sometimes the answer is just sit with it and wait. And it's uncomfortable. And so many of us are not good with those vague sorts of liminal spaces.
Absolutely. And you're making me think of times when it's been advice I didn't want to hear. Oh, that relationship needs to end because it's not healthy and it's bringing out the worst in me. No. I'm strong enough. I got this. I'm going to double down, And that liminal space was especially hard to be in when some part of me knew the truth.
Yeah.
But I didn't truly feel capable of taking the action that needed to happen.
Yeah. I'm dead air, but I'm just thinking of that because it's we've talked about this before, that idea of things that you don't want to hear. And while that's certainly true, that we find ourselves in situations sometimes where there's something that's going to be difficult for us to do, and so we just don't want to think about it. I think it can also be potentially toxic when someone comes to us and says, I know you don't want to hear this, but. And they may or may not actually know what we need to hear. But that assumption that they somehow do, I don't think leads to very productive decisions being made. I think it's, I
would agree with you, because I think those kinds of, that kind of relationship between the advice giver and the person receiving the advice, one or both of those people is believing that the person who's receiving the advice can't figure it out for themselves.
Right.
And that's a disempowered position to come from. And this, I don't intend this to be a plug for coaching, but I am a coach and I see the world this way, right? That this is a reason to hire a professional coach, because a good one will stay out of giving you advice and keep tuning you into yourself to the point where you can find your power, you can find your choice, you can receive all kinds of input from articles and podcasts and people in your life who think you should do such and such a thing, and discern what is true for you and take action that is your life. And that's the authentic position. And that's, to your point, that's where the productivity happens. That's where the motivation ends up being the most sustainable and fulfilling. That's where the true joy and satisfaction and a sense of being in the flow comes, because you did what was yours to do and experience the integrity in that, the connection between, oh, I wanted this and now it's working out. Yes, great. Keep going, right? That's a life well lived.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'm glad that you brought up coaching. And this was, something that I referenced at the beginning of the episode, that you had reposted on LinkedIn something that someone had shared about coaching not being about giving advice. And so often the word coaching is used in business as a synonym for giving advice. And
nice advice.
They're two different things, I think.
Absolutely. And I think advice actually fits more under the heading of hiring a consultant or even a mentor. Mm-hmm. Those people probably should be giving you some advice. They have technical or practical skills and knowledge of a situation, and you're going to them for that. And that's super important. Please
Yes.
do it. Do it often.
Yes.
Especially if you're in transition or building something you've never built before. Yes. But a professional coach is something different. That's someone trained to walk beside you to see what is that landscape inside your head. How do you have it hooked up? And given how you have it hooked up, what is the right choice for you? And how can we help you see it and discern it? And if you can't, how can we help you clear the mirror or clear the path so that you know, oh, this is the way to go? Help that fog lift. And clearly that's part of why I became a coach, because frankly, I am someone who people come to for advice often. And that's been true my whole life, even when I was young. Not that they should have, but my parents even came to me for advice when I was little.
Yeah.
That's sort of in my nature.
Yep.
And I loved it when people took my advice and things worked out. I didn't like it so much when people took my advice and things didn't work out. And I felt really offended when people didn't take my advice. Mm. But then I became a coach. And lo and behold, coaching was not about giving advice. And it blew the top of my head off a little bit. But it also taught me this incredible skill set where I get to see people, see who they are, see how they're working, operating inside, and show them that. And then they know what to do. That fog lifts and they just say, oh, this is the side of the road I need to drive on. And they start driving there without any hard work or slogging through things. It just becomes clear.
Yeah.
And that's the sweet spot.
Yes. I very much relate to you saying that people come to you for advice and have always come to you for advice.
I thought you would.
Yeah. It's the same. And over time, I have finally learned, it's that do unto others, I guess, of like when I'm feeling stuck, when I'm feeling lost, when I'm feeling unsure about what to do, what is it that's actually helpful to me? And maybe that's how I should approach situations where people are asking for advice. Asking questions to get them thinking, making observations to help bring them back to their values, their authenticity. And, I think that is where I sometimes struggled in my professional life, because I was in situations where I would have, a management system that was expecting me to give advice. And I was like, no, no, that doesn't feel true to me to give advice. What feels true to me is helping this person be the best version of themselves so that they can do the best work. And that's not giving prescriptive advice. So that's difficult. And I think it's difficult in our culture in general to take an approach to giving and receiving advice that isn't so cut and dry, that is a little bit more open-ended and more of a conversation, a two-way, than a handing information down to someone.
I want to get into some tactics, and I want to hear some of the things that you have used as a manager.
Okay, sure.
But before we do that, I want to hit on that. Don't you think that the creativity in someone really comes alive when you've taken this approach, as opposed to you do what I tell you to do?
Yes, absolutely. Because being prescriptive, I think often it's micromanaging that shuts people's creativity down. And they start hiding who they really are and how they'd really solve problems, because they end up feeling like I'm not good enough or I'm somehow flawed. I just don't get this. I'm just like a failure at this.
I feel like people sometimes too, they end up feeling like they're grasping at straws or trying to make some kind of authority outside of themselves happy. And then like you're talking to about the confidence gets lost, or the knowing about how to proceed. Whereas when they come up with some part of the solution or the way forward, then the vision has been shaped a little bit, and they know the bounds of where to experiment and where to follow the brief, so to speak.
Right. And again, I mean, from my background, from my perspective, yes, again, there are some times when you need to be a little prescriptive, like, okay, you've put this text in red. That could be an accessibility issue for people with color blindness. So maybe don't do that. In fact, you should not do that, so that you can have a more accessible design. But that's different than me reading something or looking at a design and saying, well, that's not how I would have done it. So I'm going to be prescriptive and make you do it the way that I would do it.
Yeah. About things that are choices.
Yes.
Yeah. So in your work as a manager, what are some of the questions or the reflections that you've given people that have helped them discover their own advice or wisdom?
Well, I mean, it varies so much based on what the situation is. But I think a very powerful question, and I word it differently depending on the situation, is, what do you want to do? Like, let's take away all the things you think you're expected to do. Let's take away all the limitations you think you have. Some of them may be true, some of them may be perceived, but let's take away those limitations. And if it was only up to you to make this choice or do this thing, what do you want to do? And it's not something that, what I've noticed is it takes practice for people to get in touch with themselves enough to just blurt out what that answer is. Sometimes it's a very hard question for people to answer because they've gotten so buried under the weight of other people's expectations or how other people say it should be, that they're out of touch with their own voice.
As a recovering perfectionist, I can really relate to that. Get it perfect, and then it would be fine.
Yeah.
And even hearing you say, well, what do you want? Like a little came up for me. Because it does take me time to tune into maybe my heart or my inner knowing to find what I want. It's not always right there on the surface. So that's interesting that it takes practice.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I need to give people a permission slip.
Yeah.
I need to say, you know what? Go do this the way that you want to do. If it ends up being a mess, that's fine. Like, we can work with a mess, but we can't work with nothing.
Yeah.
So just do something, just get something out there. And then here's the thing. When they do that, 100% of the time, there's something, there's some gem, there's some glimmer in what they've done that is a reflection of what they really want to do. And then there's something to work with. Then there's something to say, okay, more of that, more of that, more of that.
I like what you're pointing to. You're making me think of a partnership style version of that question. Something like, okay, if I could have it all my way, here's how it would be for me. You know, it would be in this format and we'd stick to this color scheme. But then you pause and you hand it over to the other person and say, I've told you my version, but now setting all of that aside, if you could have it all your way, how would you have it? And then you look to see what's in the Venn diagram, the middle of the Venn diagram.
Yep.
There,
Yep.
right? That becomes a jumping off point. And so, you know, this is advice in a little bit of a different way because we're talking about a management position where you're going to try to create something together ultimately. But I think it's a really practical approach that can actually produce a lot of innovation and joy for the person who's doing the work because they get to really contribute, which again, people really want to contribute to life. That's one of those fundamental human experiences that people long for.
Yes. Yes. For sure. So then let's get back to what you do as a coach. How do you handle situations where people are so used to just getting that cut and dried advice and you're not giving it to them? And they're like hungry for it because that's what they think they're supposed to get, that someone's going to like hand down from on high the answers. What do you do?
I have two approaches that I generally take. One is to say, so what would having my advice give you? And then once they understand what it would give them, then usually something shakes loose or opens up about, okay, well then knowing that, I know what to do. Or if we've already sort of covered that and they know that they have a tendency to ask for advice, I might say something like if I ask them a question and they say, I don't know, I'll say, well, if you did know, what would that sound like? Which is a little bit of a different way of asking it. You know what I mean? It's not a direct, what do you want?
Yep.
It's asking those other parts of the consciousness. If you did know, if it was coming from some other source, if you just had to give me a rough draft or a raw answer, well, what would that be like? And then, like you're talking about in the offering of a design piece, there's something there,
right,
to work with and build on and hone in until the full answer emerges.
Right.
So it's a discovery process.
Yes. This whole discussion, this whole topic lights me up so much because it's so tied to authenticity. It's the more you discover and live out your authenticity, I think the easier it is to either give yourself advice or seek ideas from others in a way that's actually productive, that moves you forward rather than holds you back.
Mm-hmm. And moves you forward in the sense that you're living the life you're supposed to live.
Yes. Thank you. Perfect clarification.
Because I think there's a way that you can follow other people's advice and you can move forward in the sense of making more money or getting that promotion or even writing that book or something. But the internal quality of that will not be the same as when you sifted it through your own discernment and found that voice of wisdom and said,
right.
Path for me.
Right.
And what's interesting is that some of the greatest contributions to mankind have come from people saying, I hear my path and I'm going to follow it. And other people told me not to. So I think there's also an important distinction here that sometimes other people's advice is colored by their own fear for you.
Right.
Or their own success with what they had the courage to do.
Right. Yep.
And that's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just to your point, it's not yours.
Right. And that sometimes, in addition to those examples that you gave, I have observed sometimes that people will give advice that will make them feel better about the choices they're currently making.
Oh, ooh, yes.
So, okay, this person that I'm giving advice to has a different path and is doing something different. But if they do that, how am I going to feel about my own choices? Am I going to feel that my choices are less valid or somehow not right? And so then the advice becomes a little bit of a projection of what the person giving it the advice wants in order to feel safe.
So this sort of circled back to the beginning of the conversation, that if you are going to seek input so that you can understand your own path, you do want to be discerning about who you're seeking that advice from. Yes.
And sometimes, I just listened to, and we can put this in the show notes, the latest podcast from Rob Bell. And one of the things he said was, you don't have to take advice from your past self. So your past self might say, this worked in the past. This worked for us, or this didn't work for us. So don't do that, or only do it this way. But your past self had a different life than your present self does. There are different circumstances. And so sometimes giving ourselves advice means giving our present self advice, or using a lot of discernment when we're listening to our past selves.
Brilliant. And I can hear the connection that the more we cultivate our authenticity and we learn those skills of tuning into our heart, tuning into our wisdom, that is where our past self becomes less of the leading voice.
Yes.
And our current presence is the leading voice. And then we're really engaged in life in a real-time, meaningful way.
Yes.
That's the prize, my friends. That is the game right there, to live life on life's terms in real time.
Fabulous.
Yeah, this was a great conversation, Jeannie.
So good. So good. Yeah. I think there's a lot here to sort of sit with, and hopefully that our listeners will consider and then decide what's best for them to do with this information or these perspectives.
I hope that's exactly what they do with it.
Yeah.
And every one of our episodes, we're so clear. This is not because we think you should do it our way. We think you should learn your way, because that's the thing that's really going to make the world a better place.
Yes. We're just giving you some sparks. I'm all about the cheesy jokes today. I don't know what it is.
I kind of love it.
Oh, well, thank you for that.
Yeah. So on that spark, that's it for today.
That's it for today. We will catch you next time. And thanks for listening to the Spark Sisters.